Zurich was blanketed in a soft layer of snow, the streets quiet beneath a gray sky. Trams glided past the frozen pavements, and the air smelled of roasted chestnuts and cold iron. In the heart of the city, nestled between the Limmat River and the University District, stood the flat where Lucas Meyer lived. Lucas was 22, a final-year student at ETH Zurich. Known for his intelligence and discipline, he was the kind of person professors admired and classmates envied. But behind the calm exterior was someone whose world was slowly unraveling. The signs had been there for months, but nobody had paid enough attention. That morning, Lucas stood in front of his mirror, tying his scarf with deliberate precision. He looked sharp, composed. But his eyes told a different story, red from another sleepless night, his thoughts still spinning from the argument he had with his father the evening before. "You have no idea what real life is, Lucas," his father had said. "You sit in that university and play genius while the world passes you by." It wasn't the first time. Every phone call home seemed to end with disappointment or silence. And today, as he walked out the door and into the frosty air, something felt different. He felt like he was on the edge, as if one wrong word could make him shatter. At the university, the atmosphere was tense. Final projects loomed, and everyone was buried in stress. Nina Keller, Lucas's closest friend since their first year, spotted him in the library. "You look like you haven't slept," she said gently. "I haven't," he replied without looking up. Nina didn't press. She had learnt that Lucas only opened up when he was ready. But even she couldn't deny that he was slipping away, little by little. She had seen him skipping lectures, disappearing for days, and coming back with hollow eyes and a fake smile. That evening, Lucas walked alone through the narrow alleys of Niederdorf. The lights from the cafes flickered on the wet cobblestones. A jazz tune played softly from a bar nearby. He used to love this part of the city. It used to calm him. But not tonight. His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You're not as invisible as you think." He stopped walking. For a moment, everything was still. His heart raced as he looked around. No one was watching. At least, no one obvious. Was it a joke? A mistake? Or something more? Lucas shoved the phone into his pocket and kept walking, faster now, his breath quickening in the cold. He didn't know it yet, but that message would be the first crack in a carefully controlled life. Something was coming. Something he couldn't stop. The quiet storm had begun. 2 days passed. Lucas had barely spoken to anyone. He skipped his programming lab, missed a project meeting, and ignored Nina's calls. Each night, he returned home with eyes dim and shoulders hunched, carrying with him an invisible weight. The message haunted him. He had reread it dozens of times, but no answers came. It was a Friday when he decided to clear his head. He boarded the number 2 tram and rode it to the lakeside promenade. The sky above Lake Zurich was painted in streaks of lavender and gray. Tourists strolled slowly with steaming cups of coffee, unaware of the storm brewing in Lucas's mind. He sat at the edge of the dock, watching the swans glide across the icy water. His breath came out in short clouds, and for a moment, he almost convinced himself it was nothing. Just stress. Exams. Expectations. Everyone felt like this sometimes, didn't they? Then his phone buzzed again. Another message. "You think hiding near the lake makes you safer?" His hands froze. He looked around, scanning the promenade. Faces, couples, joggers, families. None looked suspicious. But someone was watching. Someone knew where he was. He stood up quickly and backed away from the water. He could hear his heartbeat in his ears now. He texted Nina for the first time in days. "Can we meet tonight? Just talk." She replied almost immediately. "Of course. You scared me. Meet at our usual cafe?" That evening, Lucas arrived early. Café Lindenhof was small, tucked between a bookstore and a florist in the old part of Zurich. It had warm lights and a scent of cinnamon and roasted beans. A place that once brought him comfort. When Nina arrived, she looked relieved but also wary. "Lucas," she said quietly, sitting across from him. "What's going on?" He hesitated, unsure how to begin. "I think I'm being followed. Watched. Someone knows where I am at all times." Nina blinked, then leaned in. What do you mean? Have you told anyone else?
No, just you.
And they messaged me again today. At the lake. Show me. Lucas handed her his phone. Her eyes widened as she read the messages. She said nothing for a long while. You don't think this is just a prank? She asked.
No.
This isn't someone joking. They know things. They know what I'm thinking, where I'm going. She placed the phone on the table carefully. Then we need to figure out who it is. And why. Lucas nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. What if I did something without realizing it? What if this isn't random? Nina frowned. You mean someone you wronged? I don't know, he whispered. They sat in silence, the cafe humming around them, unaware of the danger quietly unfolding at their corner table. As they left the cafe together, Lucas caught a glimpse of a figure across the street. Standing still, watching. The street lamp flickered above them, and in that split second, the person disappeared into the shadows. The icy waters of Lake Zurich were no longer the coldest thing in Lucas's world. Monday came with heavy skies and low fog crawling across the city. At ETH Zurich, the corridors echoed with students' rushed footsteps and murmured conversations. Lucas kept his head down, his hood up, as he passed through the engineering building. He had barely slept since the meeting with Nina. The figure in the shadows haunted his thoughts, the messages now playing in his mind like an endless loop. Something was not right, and he could no longer pretend it was just in his head. That afternoon, Lucas returned to the university's old archive room, tucked behind the central library. It was rarely used now, filled with dusty boxes of outdated research, old journals, and forgotten thesis projects. He knew it as a quiet place, somewhere no one would think to follow him. He opened the heavy door and stepped inside. The air smelled of paper and time. He moved to the back, behind a stack of old filing cabinets, and pulled out a box he had stored there months ago, notes from a previous project that had somehow made him uncomfortable. Not because of the topic, but because of what he had found during the research. He spread the papers on the floor. A network of articles, printed emails, and handwritten notes lay before him. At the center was a name, Professor Leonard Voss. Voss had been Lucas's mentor during his second year. Brilliant, influential, and intimidating. He had led a classified research project into biometric data encryption. Lucas was one of the student assistants. But midway through the project, something had changed. Files disappeared. A student dropped out without warning. Then Voss transferred to a private tech institute outside the city. No explanation, no goodbyes. Lucas remembered stumbling across a folder of data logs that didn't match the official results. When he brought it up, Voss dismissed it and warned him not to ask again. Lucas hadn't, but he had kept copies, just in case. Now, as he looked over them again, something clicked. One of the anomaly logs contained a hidden metadata tag, an IP address. Lucas traced it on his laptop, his fingers trembling. The result made his stomach turn. It was a private surveillance server, registered under a shell company, located in the same building where Voss had moved his lab. He stood up too quickly, knocking over a pile of books. Still chasing ghosts, a voice said. Lucas froze. From behind one of the shelves, a tall man stepped out. Mid-30s, clean-cut, wearing a dark coat. His accent was Swiss-German, but his tone was strangely calm. You're Lucas Meyer, the boy who sees too much. Who are you? Lucas demanded. I'm just here to give you advice, the man said, smiling faintly. Stop digging. It won't end well. Lucas took a step back, his heart hammering. How do you know who I am? The man ignored the question. You should enjoy your youth, Lucas. Zurich is beautiful in winter. Don't waste your time chasing shadows. And then, just like that, he walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. Lucas stood in silence, breath held, eyes fixed on the exit. He wasn't just being watched. He was being hunted. The next day, Lucas didn't return to his classes. Instead, he took the S-Bahn to a quiet district on the outskirts of Zurich, where the hills were dusted with snow and the streets were nearly silent. He needed space, distance, time to think. He walked through a wooded trail that led to an abandoned railway tunnel, a place he had visited once during a university hiking trip. Back then, it was a harmless curiosity, overgrown and silent. Now it felt like the only place left untouched by digital eyes. Inside the tunnel, Lucas sat on a cold stone ledge and opened his laptop. He rerouted his connection through 3 virtual private networks. He didn't trust his phone anymore. The surveillance logs from Voss's project were still open, but now he noticed something strange, a repeating identifier buried deep in the file headers. It matched the serial code of his student ID card. His entire presence in the project had been logged, not just his work but his movements, even what terminals he used. He felt sick. A gust of wind blew through the tunnel. Lucas looked up sharply. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, echoing off the concrete walls. He closed his laptop and stood, backing toward the tunnel mouth. His breath fogged in the air. A figure emerged from the darkness. But it wasn't the man from the archive room. It was someone else. A woman, perhaps late 20s, wearing a wool coat and gloves, her blonde hair tied back. "Lucas Meyer," she called out softly, her voice neutral. He didn't reply. She raised her hands slightly. "I'm not here to hurt you. My name is Amelia Roth. I work for a private investigations firm." "How did you find me?" "You're not as hidden as you think. But I'm not your enemy." She took a step closer. "We've been watching Voss. For years. You stumbled into something real, Lucas. You're not imagining it." He narrowed his eyes. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you're the first student who kept records. And because Voss made people disappear." Lucas stared at her, unsure whether to believe a word of it. Amelia continued. "He uses biometric data, not just for encryption. He tested behavioral prediction algorithms on students. Unauthorized. Some of them suffered severe breakdowns. One committed suicide." The blood drained from Lucas's face. "That's why you're receiving messages," she said. "They're not random. The system is still running. It's learning from you, watching how you react under pressure." "So, I'm part of the test," Lucas whispered. Amelia nodded slowly. Lucas felt the world tilt beneath him. "How do I shut it down?" She glanced over her shoulder, her voice dropping. "You can't, but you can expose it. I can help you, but you'll have to make a choice." He swallowed hard. "What choice?" "Stay silent and stay safe, or go public and risk everything." The wind howled through the tunnel once more. In that moment, Lucas knew there was no safe path left. Lucas followed Amelia out of the tunnel in silence. The cold bit through his coat, but his mind burned with questions. They walked down a snowy path toward a car parked beneath a leafless tree. It was a black hatchback with tinted windows. Amelia opened the door and motioned for him to get in. Inside, the heater hummed softly. She handed him a sealed folder and a flash drive. "These," she said, "are internal memos, lab reports, and patient records. They were leaked anonymously from the private institute where Voss now works. We've been cross-referencing them with your old project data." Lucas flipped through the folder. Redacted lines, biometric patterns, brain scan models, and psychological profiles. Some of the names were familiar. Fellow students. "I thought this was just research," he murmured. "It started as research. Then it became control," Amelia replied. "The project had a nickname, Shattenkind, Shadow Child. The idea was to test behavioral nudging through micro-events. Delays, messages,
Sounds.
changes in lighting. All tracked and measured. They used us like lab rats."
"They still are," Amelia said.
"The system they developed is called Vector. It doesn't just monitor. It interferes." Lucas stared out the window at the snowy landscape. Why hasn't anyone stopped it? Because no one wants to admit it exists. The data is buried, the funding split across unrelated departments. On paper, it's invisible. Amelia pulled out her phone and tapped the screen. A digital map appeared, highlighting a building in Zurich West, modern, gray, anonymous. That's the new lab. Vector's main server is somewhere in there. You can't hack it remotely. It requires physical access. And a biometric key. Lucas blinked. Voss. Or someone Vector still recognizes. A long silence followed. What happens if I go in?
Lucas asked.
You might find the evidence we need. Or you might vanish. He exhaled slowly. Then we do it right. With a plan. Amelia nodded. I'll handle surveillance. You'll need to draw attention elsewhere while I secure a clean exit. But first, there's someone you need to meet. She started the car. The tires crunched over frozen gravel as they drove back toward the city. They stopped near an old bookshop in Altstetten. Inside, hidden beneath the scent of aged paper and leather-bound journals, was a man in his 50s with sharp eyes and a limp. He introduced himself simply as Gregor. I used to work on the Vector project, he said without preamble, until I realized what they were really doing. Gregor unlocked a drawer and pulled out a battered notebook. Inside were hand-drawn diagrams, passwords, and access schedules from the early test phases. The system has a back door, he said. Buried so deep only a few of us knew it existed. It can only be accessed during a maintenance cycle, once every 2 weeks. That cycle begins this Friday. Lucas leaned forward. So we have 4 days. Gregor gave a grim nod. 4 days to prepare. 4 days to decide how far you're willing to go. Zurich never truly slept, but by Wednesday evening, the city took on a different rhythm. The trams moved slower. The cafes emptied earlier. Snow muffled the sounds of the world. Lucas sat alone at a window table in a small bistro near Bellevue, his fingers nervously circling the rim of his coffee cup. Amelia had given him a mission: create noise. Enough noise to force Vector's internal systems to divert resources away from the core. If he could trigger enough security alerts, the system would focus on him, leaving the actual breach window open for Amelia and Gregor. Lucas was to be the bait. He checked his watch. 18.41, it was time. He slipped into the bathroom, opened his backpack, and assembled a portable transmitter from scavenged parts Gregor had provided. It was designed to interfere with Vector's satellite uplinks, briefly, just enough to flag a warning in the system. Once activated, Lucas left the bistro without paying, slipping into the crowd at the tram stop. 10 minutes later, across the city, Amelia was waiting inside a utility closet 2 levels beneath the Zurich West Research Center. She had entered the building under the name of a real systems technician who had recently resigned. The ID badge was falsified, but the biometric override was real, taken from a thumbprint she had stolen weeks ago. As Lucas reached the university district and activated the second transmitter, this one in a student locker room, the system responded. He didn't see it, but across Zurich, monitors flashed red. Security bots initiated tracking. The name Lucas Meyer lit up across several departments. He was now officially a threat. Back beneath the research center, Amelia moved swiftly. Her path had to be perfect. One wrong move, one wrong camera, and she would be cornered. But the alerts that Lucas triggered had drawn most of the building's surveillance AI towards street-level activity. Gregor, watching from a parked car with his laptop open, fed her real-time camera loops and clearance windows. Now, third door to your left, he said through a small earpiece. Amelia found the door. It required a palm scan. She took a deep breath, pressed her hand against a glass panel, and felt it warm beneath her skin. Access granted. Inside was a humming corridor of servers, rows upon rows of blinking lights and cooling units. At the far end stood the Vector core, a sleek black monolith mounted with biometric sensors. Gregor's voice came through again. You've got 3 minutes. Amelia inserted a small module into the core's interface. A green light blinked once, then red. Not accepting the handshake, she muttered. Gregor was already typing.
The protocol changed.
They've updated the key. Then Lucas has to go deeper. Back near the university, Lucas had ducked into a campus building and found his way to the old computer lab where he had first worked on the behavioral modeling code. He powered up one of the dusty terminals. A login screen blinked. Welcome, Lucas Meyer. He hesitated, then typed in the override Amelia had given him. Lines of code burst to life. Old files, archived test logs, session replays, things he hadn't seen in months. And then he found it. A string of characters buried deep in a log folder. Shattenconvector, access, hash. He copied it, encrypted it, and transmitted it through the hidden relay to Gregor. Back at the core, the red light blinked green. Amelia smiled faintly. Handshake complete. She tapped the screen, initiating a deep data extract. And just then, the lights in the corridor dimmed. Someone else was coming. Amelia's fingers hovered over the screen as the lights flickered again. The data extraction bar crawled forward, 32%. She clenched her jaw. Every second felt stretched, fragile. Footsteps echoed outside the server room. Gregor's voice came through her earpiece, low and clipped. Someone just entered your floor. Not security. Plain clothes. No ID tags. Voss. Amelia whispered. Possible. Or one of his lieutenants. She ducked behind the server racks, silencing her device. The room's hum masked her breath as she moved like a shadow between the machines. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Two men stepped in. One carried a tablet, the other a case. Neither spoke. They moved with the unsettling precision of people who knew exactly where to look. One of them walked straight to the main core and glanced at the interface. The screen still showed a blank standby. Amelia had switched to stealth mode just in time. They circled the servers like wolves, scanning, watching. The man with the tablet tapped at the screen, frowning. Systems acting strange, he murmured in Swiss German. Check for uplink disruption, said the other. Amelia slipped behind another row. She could feel her heart pounding in her throat. If they found the extraction module, it was over. Then she saw it. One of them was moving toward the very rack where she had placed it. Her fingers wrapped around a small EMP pulse unit from her belt. A failsafe. Risky, but she had no choice. She triggered it. A low whump filled the room. Lights dimmed, then flared. The two men shouted in surprise. The tablet went dead. Systems rebooted. Emergency failover, one yelled, reaching for a wall-mounted console. But the EMP had done its job, temporarily severing the core's remote alerts and allowing the download to complete unnoticed. Gregor's voice crackled back into her earpiece. Download's finished. Now get out. Lift access is locked. Take the maintenance shaft behind the coolant chamber. Amelia ran. Sirens began to wail in the distance, probably a fire suppression response. But she moved fast, ducking into the shaft, climbing the narrow ladder 2 rungs at a time. The vent was tight, metallic, cold. It opened into a side alley behind the center, where Lucas was already waiting, breath smoking in the freezing air. He looked pale, eyes wide. They flagged me. My name is on the national database now. Amelia nodded. We expected that. It's done. He held up the encrypted drive. It's done. She exhaled, then handed him a burner phone. We're not safe yet. We'll split. Rendezvous at 3.00. Safe house Svi. If you're late, I assume the worst. Lucas wanted to argue, but he saw it in her eyes. This wasn't the time. He turned and disappeared into the snowy dark. Amelia melted into the opposite street, blending into the slow trickle of night commuters. Back inside the research center, the two men stared at the recovered systems. The core was functioning. No alarms remained. But the extraction log had been wiped clean. One of them frowned and made a call. A deep voice answered. Yes, sir. I think we've been breached. The safe house was nestled behind a shuttered bookshop in the Niederdorf district of Zurich. From the outside, it looked like a forgotten relic of a past era, with dusty windows and an old bell above the door that hadn't chimed in years. Inside, Lucas paced restlessly. He had arrived 10 minutes early, soaked from the sleet, clutching the encrypted drive in one hand and a pistol in the other. At precisely 3.00, Amelia slipped through the back entrance, her coat dripping, her boots silent on the creaky wooden floor. Anything? She asked. He shook his head. No tales. But someone followed me from the tram station to the end of the block. They turned off before I reached here. She locked the door and drew the blinds. We won't stay long. Just enough to decrypt and upload. Lucas handed her the drive. She slid it into the laptop, and lines of code danced across the screen. Moments later, a folder popped up. Archive 72. Inside were hundreds of documents, image files, audio recordings, and most disturbing of all, patient photographs. Lucas stared at the images, his face pale. They're all real. Children, women,
Men.
all strapped to surgical tables, some with visible scarring, others mid-procedure. The date stamps ranged from 3 years ago to just 2 weeks prior. Amelia clicked on a file marked Zurich Protocol, Internal, and began reading. It detailed a series of experimental procedures carried out under the guise of neurological research, using patients deemed unsuitable for reintegration. They weren't being treated. They were being harvested. Organs, neural tissue, genetic samples. For high-value private clients, Lucas whispered, his voice trembling. This is industrialist medicine turned black market. One photo stopped Amelia cold. It was of a man, late 40s, pale gray eyes, a jagged scar beneath his left ear. He was conscious, staring at the camera, restrained. Do you recognize him?
Lucas asked.
She nodded slowly. That's Dr. Voss. But different. Older. Weaker. She scrolled further and found another image, this one of the same man, standing next to a group of officials, smiling at a conference podium. The timestamps were only a month apart. 2 versions. Lucas muttered.
No.
Not versions, Amelia murmured. Doubles. Her stomach turned. Cloning? No. Too unstable. Body doubles? Surgical modification? Or synthetic reconstruction? The kind they've been testing in covert military branches. Then came the audio files. One stood out, Voss's voice, clear, cold, in Swiss-accented English. Subject 44 is responding well to cerebral grafting. Memory overlay intact. We'll present him as Dr. Emil Voss to the National Ethics Board next week. If they approve, the commercial phase begins. Amelia stared at the screen in silence. So the real Voss had either been a victim or complicit in creating his own replacement. They're replacing themselves to erase accountability, she said. So they can vanish if the operation is compromised. Lucas clenched his fists. And someone tried that same procedure on me, didn't they? Amelia nodded. You were subject 67. The room fell silent. Then Amelia straightened. We upload it all. Tonight. Public servers. Independent journalists. Every thread we can pull. But once this goes out, we'll be hunted for the rest of our lives. She met his gaze. We already are. They uploaded the archive just before sunrise. The files were dispersed across dozens of public channels, encrypted drops to whistleblower sites, anonymous tips to independent journalists in Berlin, Oslo, and London, and even a hidden folder embedded in a children's cartoon live stream watched by thousands. It was the only way to outpace a takedown. By the time the sun broke over the Zurich Sea, Zurich Protocol was already trending on fringe forums and encrypted news feeds. Journalists were reaching out. Some believed it. Most were stunned into silence. But by midday, the silence was shattered. The first server went dark. Then another. By the time Amelia and Lucas reached the Hauptbahnhof disguised as tourists, 5 of the main links had been erased, and 3 journalists who had responded now showed as unreachable. This is faster than a takedown team, Lucas muttered, his voice low. It's preemptive suppression. Someone knew. Amelia scanned the terminal. Families. Business travelers. Soldiers. But her eyes settled on a man in a gray peacoat, standing near a kiosk with a newspaper tucked under his arm. He wasn't reading. Just watching. Still a stone. We need to split, she said. Your tickets to Geneva. Mine's to Lugano. He hesitated. You're sure about this? No one survives the protocol if they're caught. Not in the same body, anyway. She squeezed his hand, then vanished into the crowd. The train rolled south through the Alps, and Amelia kept her hood up, heart pounding. At each stop, she watched the doors, bracing for agents. For Voss. For whatever version of him was still operational. Instead, an old woman with a dog sat next to her and offered her a pear. She smiled politely. But her hand never left her coat pocket, where a second drive rested. a clone of the original. In Geneva, Lucas met his contact, a former intelligence analyst turned privacy advocate. They drove to a lakeside villa where a private satellite uplink had been prepared. The goal now was to re-upload everything through an international network of academic institutions. But when the analyst powered up the system, the drive failed to read. "It's empty," he whispered. "Wiped clean." Lucas stared, his chest tight. "It was fine when we left." The analyst turned pale. "They didn't just intercept the upload. They've infected the hardware. Everything's being rewritten in real time." Suddenly, the power cut. Silence. Then footsteps on gravel outside. Lucas grabbed the analyst and dragged him toward the cellar just as the front door burst inward. Men in civilian clothes entered, their movements crisp, rehearsed. No badges. No names. Just silence. From the cellar, Lucas watched through a crack in the floorboards as they methodically searched the villa. They weren't looking for data. They were looking for him. The analyst whispered, "What do we do?" Lucas reached into his jacket and pulled out a narrow tube. "Plan Z." The man's eyes widened. "You're serious?" Lucas nodded. "They erase my past. I won't let them rewrite my future." He opened the cap. Inside was a single-use DNA disruptor designed to scramble biometric recognition. Painful.
Permanent.
But untraceable. He pressed it to his neck. 1 second of agony. Then black. 3 weeks later, snow blanketed Zurich. The headlines had quieted. The Zurich Protocol was declared a hoax by every major news outlet. The supposed whistleblowers had disappeared. No follow-up reports, no public investigations. The world moved on. But not everyone forgot. Deep beneath the ETH Zurich Library, in a restricted archive never listed on public blueprints, a server blinked awake. It had been dormant for over a decade. Now it hummed. Inside, fragments of the suppressed data began to reassemble themselves, backups created by a forgotten redundancy node Lucas had once set up as a student. He'd never mentioned it to anyone, not even Emilia. The system crawled back to life slowly, autonomously, like a brain emerging from a coma. With it, names, files, images. Faces of children misdiagnosed. Accounts of trials manipulated. Logs of transfers from Project Perennial routed through facilities across Europe. In a quiet co-working space in Vienna, Emilia opened her encrypted laptop. The second drive had indeed been corrupted. But something had changed after Lucas vanished. A week after the blackout at the villa, she'd received a strange parcel. No return address. Inside was a scarf, blood-stained and scorched, and a tiny chip embedded in the seam. She almost didn't scan it. When she did, it opened a message. His voice. Rough, fractured. "Emilia, if you're hearing this, I didn't make it. But I found a way to make the system remember. It won't be fast. But it'll start."
His voice cracked.
"Ghosts don't haunt buildings. They haunt decisions." She hadn't cried. She just began preparing. Now, each day, she uploaded one file from the reassembled archive to obscure university repositories and cloud mirrors under pseudonyms. No patterns. No traces. A year passed. A professor in Lyon cited a mysterious research file containing genetic anomalies tied to Swiss pharmaceuticals. A medical journal in Canada received a bundle of images linking neural pattern interference to experimental drugs once shelved in Basel. A defamation lawsuit in Spain collapsed when a hidden archive invalidated key testimony. The system couldn't kill ghosts. It could only chase them. One evening, as snow fell again in Zurich, a child was admitted to a hospital near Olstetten with symptoms matching an unpublished case file. The doctor paused at the screen. She frowned. The name on the outdated digital file was Lucas Meyer. The boy's records were clean. But the genetic structure showed markers Lucas had documented years before. The doctor printed the file, tucked it into her coat, and made a quiet call. On the other end of the line, a soft voice answered. "Ready when you are."